He didn't just reject my work, he humiliated me in front of everyone. The CEO smirked, called my project garbage, and moved on like my months of research meant nothing. But he didn't know the truth every hour, every piece of data, every brilliant fix was mine, and I could take it anywhere I wanted. If he thought I'd let it die here, he was about to learn what happens when you underestimate the wrong person. My name is Lauren Miller, and I've spent 8 years building my reputation as one of the best UX designers at Blue Peak Technologies. But on that Tuesday morning at 10:30, everything I'd worked for came crashing down in the most humiliating way possible. I stood at the front of conference room A, my carefully prepared slides glowing on the screen behind me. The entire senior leadership team sat around the polished oak table, 12 executives who controlled the company's future. At the head sat Victor Hayes, our new CEO, hired just 3 months ago to revolutionize our approach. His reputation preceded him, a Silicon Valley hotshot who'd burned through $40 million in venture capital at his last startup before it collapsed spectacularly. As you can see from the user testing data, I continued, clicking to the next slide, our enterprise clients spend an average of 47 hours training their teams on our current interface. My redesign cuts that to 12 hours, a 75% reduction. I'd spent 4 months on this project, conducting over 200 user interviews, analyzing heat maps, running A/B tests. Every decision was backed by data. This wasn't just a facelift. It was a complete reimagining of how our biggest client, Apex Systems, interacted with our platform. Victor hadn't looked up from his phone once during my 20-minute presentation. His fingers scrolled lazily across the screen, occasionally pausing to type something. The other executives watched him nervously, waiting for his reaction like courtiers anticipating a king's decree. The implementation timeline is aggressive but achievable, I said, moving to my final slides. We can roll out the beta to Apex by Q3 with full deployment. Stop! Victor's voice cut through the room like a blade. He finally looked up, his gray eyes cold and dismissive. The room fell silent, except for the hum of the air conditioning. This is garbage. The word hung in the air. I felt my face flush, heat rising from my chest to my cheeks. Someone gasped. I think it was Patricia from HR. Victor stood up, his 6'3" frame dominating the room. He walked to the screen, waving dismissively at my months of work. Garbage. Amateur hour. This looks like something a first-year design student would cobble together after watching a few YouTube tutorials. He turned to face the room, deliberately keeping his back to me. This is exactly the kind of backward thinking that's been holding Blue Peak back. We're trying to innovate here, not rearrange deck chairs on the Titanic. My throat constricted. 8 years. 8 years of successful projects, of clients specifically requesting me, of design awards and industry recognition. And this man who'd been here 12 weeks was destroying it all in front of everyone who mattered. The data clearly shows, I started, but Victor cut me off with a laugh. Data. You want to talk about data? My nephew just graduated from Stanford's school. He could redesign this entire platform in a weekend using AI tools. He gestured at the screen again. This is why we're losing market share. Because we have people like you thinking small, playing it safe, coloring inside the lines. Jennifer, my direct supervisor, shifted uncomfortably in her seat, but said nothing. Tom from product development stared at his laptop. Nobody would meet my eyes. I've already brought in a real design team from my network, Victor continued, addressing the room as if I'd already disappeared. People who understand disruption, who think big. We'll be scrapping all legacy projects effective immediately. Legacy projects, my project, 4 months of nights and weekends, of meticulous research, of fighting for every user interview and testing session. Legacy. Thank you for your effort, Laura, he said, getting my name wrong, whether intentional or not. It was the final insult. You can sit down now. I gathered my laptop and materials with as much dignity as I could muster. My hands didn't shake. I wouldn't give him that satisfaction. As I walked back to my seat, the silence was deafening. 24 eyes avoided mine. Victor had already moved on, pulling up his own presentation about his revolutionary vision for Blue Peak's future. Charts and buzzwords filled the screen synergy. Disruption. blockchain integration for no apparent reason. The executives nodded along, some taking notes, all desperate to align themselves with the new power structure. But as I sat there, pretending to pay attention while my career imploded, one thought crystallized in my mind. Victor Hayes had no idea what he'd just done. He saw me as nobody, a minor obstacle to bulldoze on his path to whatever grandiose failure he was orchestrating this time. He didn't know that I'd built this entire redesign on my own time, on my own equipment. He didn't know about the relationships I'd cultivated with our clients over the years. Most importantly, he didn't know that when you humiliate someone who's given everything to a company, you create something far more dangerous than an enemy. You create someone with nothing left to lose. Back at my desk, I stared at the wall of awards and certificates I'd accumulated over 8 years at Blue Peak. Employee of the Year 2019. Excellence in Design Innovation 2020. The framed email from our previous CEO, Martin Walsh, praising my work on the Patterson Industries account that saved a $3 million contract. Martin had understood what Victor clearly didn't, that great design wasn't about flashy presentations or buzzword-filled pitches. It was about understanding users, solving real problems, creating interfaces that felt invisible because they worked so perfectly. Under Martin's leadership, Blue Peak had grown from a 50-person startup to a 300-employee success story. Then Martin retired last year, and the board brought in Victor Hayes to take us to the next level. I pulled up Victor's LinkedIn profile. Though I'd already memorized his dubious accomplishments, former CEO of Next Gen Solutions burned through $40 million in 18 months before shuttering. Before that, VP of Innovation at Tech Forward left just before their SEC investigation, but somehow, he'd convinced our board that his connections and disruptive vision were exactly what Blue Peak needed. Within his first week, Victor had started replacing key positions with his own people. Sarah from Product Strategy gone, replaced by Victor's former colleague from NextGen. Robert from Engineering pushed out, his role filled by another Victor loyalist. They all had the same look: young, aggressive, full of jargon but light on actual experience. My phone buzzed, a text from Jennifer, my supervisor. "I'm so sorry about what happened. Can we talk?" I met her in the parking garage at 2:15, away from prying eyes and ears. "Lauren, I should have said something," Jennifer started, her usual composure cracking. "What he did was completely unprofessional." "But you didn't say anything," I replied, not bothering to hide my disappointment. Jennifer looked away. "He's already pushed out 3 VPs who challenged him. I have 2 kids in college. I can't afford to—" "I get it," I interrupted. I did get it. Fear was Victor's primary management tool. "There's more," Jennifer continued, lowering her voice. "He's bringing in his own design team next week. They're getting the entire Apex Systems account, your redesign. All your research, he's handing it over to them to fix." My stomach dropped. "He can't do that. That's my work, my research." "Technically, it belongs to Blue Peak," Jennifer said. But she looked uncomfortable. At least, that's what legal would say. That night, I pulled out my employment contract and read every line. There it was, buried in Section 12.3. All work product created using company resources or during company time shall remain the exclusive property of Blue Peak Technologies. But here's what Victor didn't know, what nobody knew. I'd been so passionate about this project that I'd done the initial research and design work entirely on my own time. Every user interview was conducted after hours, using my personal laptop. The prototype was built on my home computer using software I paid for myself. I'd only moved it to the company system last month for the presentation. I opened my personal laptop and pulled up the original files. Everything was there, time-stamped, dated, proving the work was done outside company hours and resources. The contracts I'd signed with user testing participants, paid from my own pocket, the software licenses in my name, 4 months of meticulous documentation that I'd kept out of habit, never imagining I'd need it for something like this. My phone rang. It was Marcus from Apex Systems. "Lauren, I heard about what happened in the meeting today," he said. "Word travels fast in this industry. I'm sure Victor will have his new team create something amazing for you," I said, trying to keep the bitterness out of my voice. Marcus laughed. "Victor's an idiot. We both know that. Listen, I can't say much right now, but don't make any hasty decisions. The Apex team has been very impressed with your work over the years. Very impressed. After we hung up, I sat in my home office, surrounded by design books, user research materials, and 8 years of memories from Blue Peak. On my desk was a photo from the company picnic 3 years ago, all of us wearing matching t-shirts. Martin Walsh with his arm around my shoulder after announcing my promotion to senior designer. That Blue Peak was dead. Victor had killed it, replaced it with his toxic mixture of ego and incompetence, but he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd assumed I was powerless, that humiliating me would make me crawl away quietly. I opened a new document and started making a list. Every contact I'd cultivated, every piece of work I could prove was mine, every option available to someone who'd been pushed too far. Victor thought he'd crushed me in that conference room. In reality, he'd done something far more dangerous. He'd set me free. Free from loyalty to a company that no longer existed. Free from the polite politics of corporate life. Free to play by a different set of rules. I looked at the photo one more time, then placed it face down in my desk drawer. The Lauren in that picture, loyal, dedicated, always putting the company first, was gone. It was time to introduce Victor Hayes to the Lauren he'd created. The law office of Brennan & Associates deoccupied a modest suite in downtown, far from Blue Peak's gleaming campus. I'd found Rachel Brennan through a friend who'd navigated a similar situation with a tech startup. She specialized in intellectual property disputes, particularly in the gray areas where corporate employment met individual creativity. "Walk me through exactly how you developed this project," Rachel said, adjusting her glasses as she reviewed the stack of documents I'd brought. I laid out everything: the evening hours at coffee shops, the weekend user interviews, the personal software licenses, the prototype development on my home computer, every receipt, every timestamp, every email sent from my personal account. Rachel nodded slowly, a slight smile forming. "You documented this beautifully, almost like you knew you'd need it someday." "I'm just naturally paranoid," I said. "My father was laid off after 20 years at IBM. He taught me to always protect myself." "Smart man. Now, here's the situation. Blue Peak owns anything you created during work hours or using their resources. But this," she tapped the pile of evidence, "this is yours. The question is, what do you want to do with it?" "I want to use it somewhere else, somewhere that will appreciate it." Rachel leaned back. "You're free to do that, legally speaking, but there are considerations: non-compete clauses, client relationships, the risk of litigation. Even if Blue Peak doesn't have a case, they could make your life difficult just through legal harassment." I pulled out my employment contract again. "My non-compete is limited to direct employment with clients for 6 months. It says nothing about joining competitors." "You've done your homework." That evening, I created a new email account and began quietly reaching out to my network. Not the obvious moves that would trigger alarms at Blue Peak, but subtle inquiries, former colleagues who'd moved on, industry contacts from conferences, people who knew my work and, more importantly, knew my value. At the office, I became invisible. I arrived at 8:30, left at 5 sharp. I attended meetings when required, contributed the minimum necessary, and spent my days documenting everything. Every email from Victor dismissing ideas, every message from his new team taking credit for existing work, every piece of evidence that Blue Peak under Victor's leadership was becoming a toxic wasteland. The new design team arrived the following Monday. 3 people in their mid-20s, all wearing identical black turtlenecks like they'd coordinated their Steve Jobs cosplay. Their leader, Brad something, immediately commandeered the large conference room as their innovation space and covered the walls with incomprehensible diagrams and post-it notes. "Lauren, right." Brad approached my desk on his second day. "We're going to need all your files on the Apex project. Victor says you had some preliminary work we can build from." Preliminary work. 4 months of research reduced to a stepping stone for his innovation. "Sure," I said with my best corporate smile. "I'll send over what I have." I sent him the files I'd transferred to the company system, the bare presentation, some basic mock-ups, carefully scrubbed of anything that could be traced to my personal work, the real treasure, the detailed user research, the tested prototype. The implementation roadmap remained safely on my personal drives. Brad looked confused when he reviewed what I sent. This is it. Victor said you'd been working on this for months. That's everything on the company servers, I said truthfully. Meanwhile, my quiet networking was bearing fruit. 3 different companies had expressed interest, but one stood out: Novacore Solutions. They were Blue Peak's biggest competitor, aggressive and well-funded. More importantly, their creative director was Marissa Cole, my former mentor who'd left Blue Peak 2 years ago when she saw the writing on the wall about Martin's retirement. Marissa's email was brief. Heard about your situation. Coffee this Saturday, 10 a.m., Neutral Ground Cafe. Novacore's headquarters sat directly across the highway from Blue Peak. 15 floors of glass and steel that seemed to mock Victor's empire from across the divide. I arrived at 6:30 p.m. on Monday, after Blue Peak's regular hours, wearing my best interview suit under a casual jacket I could quickly remove. The executive conference room was elegant but understated. No flashy tech bro aesthetics, just quality furniture and a view of the city skyline. Marissa was there with David Park, Novacore's CEO, and their VP of Product, Sandra Williams. Lauren, we've heard excellent things about you for years, David began, his tone warm but professional. Marissa showed me your prototype. It's exactly the kind of user-focused design we pride ourselves on at Novacore. Thank you. I believe good design should be invisible. Users shouldn't have to think about it. Precisely our philosophy, Sandra chimed in. Which is why we're struggling to understand how Blue Peak could reject this, unless, she paused. There's more to the story. I chose my words carefully. Blue Peak's new leadership has different priorities. They're more interested in disruption for its own sake than solving actual user problems. David and Sandra exchanged glances. They knew exactly what I meant. Let's discuss specifics, David said, pulling up a presentation. We're prepared to offer you the position of Principal UX Designer, reporting directly to Marissa. Your starting salary would be 30% above your current compensation, with a signing bonus and equity options. The number he showed me made my poker face slip for just a moment. It was more than generous, it was a statement. Additionally, Marissa added, you'd have full autonomy to build your team and implement your vision. We have the resources and, frankly, the urgent need to revolutionize our enterprise offerings. What about the Apex Systems account? I asked directly. David smiled. We've been in conversations with them for months. They're frustrated with Blue Peak's recent changes. Marcus Patterson specifically mentioned that they're considering alternatives. If we could demonstrate a superior solution, particularly one that addresses their pain points. The prototype I showed Marissa does exactly that, I said. Every feature is based on hundreds of hours of user research with Apex's actual teams. Research that belongs to you, personally, Sandra asked carefully. I have documentation proving all foundational work was done on my own time and resources. My lawyer has reviewed everything. Speaking of which, David pulled out a folder. We'd want to ensure complete legal protection for both parties. Novacore would cover any legal costs if Blue Peak attempts litigation, though from what our legal team says, they'd have no case. We spent the next hour discussing details: team structure, implementation timeline, resource allocation. They'd clearly done their homework, knowing exactly what would be needed to not just match but exceed Blue Peak's offerings. There's one more thing, Marissa said as the meeting wrapped up. We have a major client presentation in 6 weeks, the Enterprise Solutions Summit. Every major player in our space will be there, including Apex Systems. If you were to join us, would you be ready to present by then? 6 weeks to polish and implement what I'd been perfecting for months? Absolutely. David stood, extending his hand. Lauren, we'd like to formally extend this offer. Take the time you need to consider it, but we hope you'll join the Novacore family. The next morning at Blue Peak felt surreal. I sat through Victor's all-hands meeting where he ranted about revolutionary paradigm shifts while Brad's team struggled to understand basic user experience principles. The new design they'd created for Apex was a mess of trendy animations and unnecessary features that would confuse rather than help users. Jennifer pulled me aside after the meeting. Brad's team is panicking. They have a demo with Apex on Friday and nothing's working properly. Victor's threatening to fire them if they don't deliver. That's unfortunate, I said neutrally. Lauren, they're asking for your help. Unofficially. Brad knows you understand the Apex account better than anyone. I pretended to consider it. I wish I could help, but Victor was clear that my approach was garbage. I wouldn't want to contaminate their revolutionary vision with my outdated thinking. Jennifer knew exactly what I was doing, and I could see a hint of approval in her eyes. That evening, I called Marcus at Apex from my personal phone. "Lauren, please tell me you're calling with good news," he said immediately. "That depends. How bad was Brad's presentation?" Marcus laughed bitterly. It was like they'd never seen our platform before. They suggested features we explicitly said we don't want and ignored everything we actually need. Victor kept talking over them, making it worse. Our CEO walked out halfway through. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, though I wasn't sorry at all. "Lauren, I'll be direct. If you were to land somewhere else, somewhere that could actually deliver what Apex needs, we'd be very interested in having that conversation. Very interested. Hypothetically speaking, if that were to happen, how quickly could Apex move on a new partnership? For the right solution, we could move within weeks. Our contract with Blue Peak is up for renewal in 2 months, and after today's disaster, the board is ready to explore options." After we hung up, I sat at my desk with Novacore's offer letter in front of me. The smart move would be to negotiate, to ask for a few days, to maximize my leverage, but I was tired of playing it safe, tired of being undervalued, tired of watching incompetence rewarded while real work was dismissed as garbage. I signed the offer letter and emailed it to David Park at 11:45 p.m. with a start date in 2 weeks. The next morning, I began drafting my resignation letter. Short, professional, giving the standard 2 weeks' notice, no explanations, no accusations, just a clean exit. The countdown had begun. Friday arrived like a storm everyone saw coming, but no one could prevent. I came in early, around 7:30 a.m., to find Brad's team already in the conference room, surrounded by empty energy drink cans and the desperation of an all-nighter gone wrong. Through the glass walls, I watched them frantically clicking through their presentation, their faces pale with exhaustion and panic. Brad kept running his hands through his hair, making it stand up in increasingly chaotic directions. His 2 teammates were arguing about something on the screen, their voices rising just enough to carry through the door. I settled at my desk with my coffee, pulling up routine tasks while keeping one eye on the conference room. At 9:15, Victor strutted in, his usual swagger slightly diminished. He went straight to Brad's team, and even from across the floor, I could see him gesticulating angrily. Jennifer appeared at my desk. "They want you in the demo." "I wasn't invited," I said calmly. "Victor just changed his mind. He wants all hands on deck for the Apex presentation." How thoughtful of him to remember I exist. The Apex team arrived at 10 sharp. Marcus led the group, accompanied by their CEO, Patricia Huang, their CTO, James Morrison, and 2 other executives I recognized from previous meetings. Patricia's expression was already skeptical. She'd clearly been talked into giving Blue Peak one more chance. We gathered in the main presentation room. Victor opened with his usual buzzword soup about synergy and disruption, but Patricia cut him off after 2 minutes. "Victor, we're here to see the redesign. Our teams are struggling with the current interface. We need solutions, not philosophy." Brad stepped forward, his laptop trembling slightly in his hands. "Of course we've created something truly revolutionary." The disaster unfolded in slow motion. The first screen wouldn't load properly. When it finally did, the navigation menu was covering half the content. Brad clicked frantically, trying to demonstrate the innovative gesture-based controls that nobody had asked for and that crashed the browser twice. "This is supposed to make things easier?" James Morrison asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "It's still in beta," Brad stammered. "We're iterating rapidly." "You've had 3 weeks," Patricia interrupted. "This is worse than what we currently have." Victor jumped in, trying to salvage the situation. "What Brad means is that we're taking a bold, disruptive approach." "Stop." Patricia's voice could have frozen fire. "Just stop. Disruption without purpose is just destruction." She turned to Marcus. "We're done here." As they stood to leave, Marcus caught my eye. "Lauren, could you walk us out? I'd like to discuss the transition timeline for your current projects." Victor's face went red. "Lauren isn't leading any Apex projects. She's been our primary contact for 3 years," Marcus said coolly. We'd like to ensure continuity during any transitions. In the elevator, Patricia Huang turned to me. That prototype you showed Marcus last month, the one from your original presentation, that's what we need. I kept my expression neutral. That project was killed. Mr. Hayes felt it wasn't innovative enough. Victor Hayes is an idiot, Patricia said flatly. Marcus tells me you might be exploring other opportunities. I couldn't comment on that, I said carefully. James Morrison smiled. Of course not. But hypothetically, if someone with your expertise and that prototype were to surface at, say, a competitor, Apex would be very interested in exploring that partnership. The elevator opened at the lobby. Patricia handed me her card. My direct line, for when you're able to have hypothetical conversations. I returned to find chaos. Victor was screaming at Brad's team. Other employees were pretending to work while obviously eavesdropping. Jennifer was nowhere to be seen, probably hiding in her office. An email popped up from David Park at Novacore. Heard about the Apex demo. Their CEO just called me. We should accelerate your start date if possible. I looked around the office at Victor still ranting, at Brad near tears, at the demoralized faces of my colleagues who'd watched this company transform from a great workplace into a toxic nightmare. 2 weeks suddenly felt too long. That afternoon, another email arrived, this time from Apex's procurement department, copied to Patricia Huang and Marcus. Please be advised that Apex Systems is initiating a comprehensive review of our UX platform partnership. We are now accepting proposals from qualified vendors, RFP attached. The RFP deadline was 6 weeks away, exactly when Novacore's Enterprise Solutions Summit presentation would happen. Victor must have seen the email too because he stormed out of his office, his face purple with rage. Emergency meeting, conference room, now. As the team gathered, I stayed at my desk, calmly organizing my files. Jennifer texted me, "You need to be in here." "I'm good, thanks," I replied. Through the glass, I watched Victor rage about loyalty, about competition, about how Apex would regret this decision. Brad's team sat silently, their revolutionary spirits thoroughly crushed. Other employees looked uncomfortable, scared, or in a few cases secretly pleased. My phone buzzed, a text from Marissa. "Heard you had quite the morning. David wants to know if you can start Monday. Full pay for the notice period you're giving up, plus a discretionary bonus for the accelerated timeline." I looked at the conference room again. Victor was now drawing incomprehensible diagrams on the whiteboard, his new team nodding along like broken bobbleheads. "Monday works," I texted back. The beauty of it was that Victor thought he still had 2 weeks to fix this, 2 weeks to scramble, to force his team to create something, anything, that might save the Apex account. He had no idea I'd already moved my personal items home gradually, that my important files were already transferred, that my resignation letter was already saved in my drafts, ready to send at 4:59 p.m. He thought he'd won by humiliating me in that meeting 3 weeks ago. He was about to learn that in the tech world, talent and relationships matter more than ego and bluster. And the best part? He'd created this entire situation himself. Friday afternoon crawled by with the peculiar weight of a secret about to detonate. I'd already removed everything personal from my desk over the past week. A photo here, a plant there, subtle enough that no one noticed the gradual emptying. My drawers contained only company property branded pens, a Blue Peak notebook I'd never used, the laptop that would be returned in exactly 4 hours. At 3:30 p.m. I made my rounds, casual and unremarkable. First to IT, returning a spare keyboard I'd borrowed months ago, then to accounting, clearing up an old expense report, finally to HR, updating my emergency contact information, a normal administrative task that also ensured all my personal data was current for the final paycheck. Patricia from HR looked tired. "Rough day, huh?" "Seems like it's been a rough month," I replied. She glanced toward Victor's office and lowered her voice. "Between you and me, I've processed 6 resignation letters this week. Senior people. The board has no idea how bad it's getting." I kept my expression neutral, but internally I filed this information away. The exodus had already begun. At 4 p.m., Jennifer stopped by my desk. "Victor wants Brad's team to work through the weekend on a new Apex proposal. He wants you to review it before Monday. I'll do my best, I said, knowing I'd never see that proposal. Lauren, she paused, studying my unusually clean desk. Is everything okay? Everything's exactly where it needs to be. She gave me a long look, and I think she knew. Jennifer had survived 15 years in corporate tech. She could read the signs, but she just nodded and walked away. At 4:45 p.m., I backed up my personal browser bookmarks and cleared my browsing history. I logged out of all personal accounts, double-checking that nothing of mine remained on the company laptop. My desk drawers were empty except for a single Blue Peak-branded stress ball, Victor's welcome gift to all employees, with his signature printed on it. I left it dead center in the middle drawer. At 4:55 p.m., I opened my draft folder and pulled up the resignation letter I'd crafted. Dear Mr. Hayes, please accept this letter as formal notification of my resignation from Blue Peak Technologies, effective immediately. I am exercising the at-will employment clause as outlined in my contract. My company property is on my desk. All pending projects have been documented and are accessible on the shared drive. Regards, Lauren Miller. No explanations, no justifications, no bridges burned explicitly, just a clean, professional exit that would leave Victor scrambling to understand what had happened. At 4:59 p.m., I hit send, copying HR and Jennifer. Then I powered down the laptop, placed it precisely in the center of my desk with my access badge on top, picked up my purse, and walked out. The parking lot was nearly empty. Most of Brad's team was still inside, probably facing another all-nighter trying to salvage something from nothing. As I reached my car, my phone exploded with notifications. Jennifer Lauren what? HR. Please call me immediately. We need to discuss transition. Victor. This is unacceptable. You're required to give 2 weeks' notice. Legal will be in touch. I sat in my car for a moment, reading the messages, but not responding. Then I blocked Victor's number, sent a brief response to HR confirming they had everything they needed, and texted Jennifer. I'm sorry I couldn't say goodbye properly. You're a good manager trapped in a bad situation. You deserve better too. 20 minutes later, as I pulled into my driveway, Marcus called. A little bird told me you're now a free agent, he said, amusement clear in his voice. News travels fast. Victor just sent a company-wide email about maintaining commitment to excellence and consequences for abandoning the team. He seems upset. I can't imagine why. He made it clear my work was garbage. Marcus laughed. Speaking of which, Patricia wants to know if that prototype you showed me might surface somewhere soon. Hypothetically. Hypothetically,